Hello, welcome to the second episode of SPT with SPTs. I'm Quinn.
I'm Hayden.
Thanks for tuning in. Um, this week we're going to go over chapters 3 and 4. Basically, just the metabolic pathways that your body uses and some hormones and their adaptations to some exercise and how you can use that to your advantage. It's slightly advanced stuff. Parts of it are definitely beneficial. Other parts of it may not make the biggest difference in your training and your adaptations, but if you want to implement it, you're more than welcome to. Or if you want to memorize it for the test, you're also more than welcome to.
Yeah, this week's gonna be some fun.
Yeah. That's I'm not gonna lie. Chapter 4 was really difficult for me to understand as I was reading it. It took some in-depth, and when discussing with other people that had taken the test, they didn't remember any questions on it. So do with that as you will.
Whether it's 2 times speeds or straight up skipping it, dealer's choice.
Chapter 3, metabolic pathways. So, metabolic specificity, there are different pathways that our body uses to create energy within the body. We mentioned them a little bit last week. We talked about ATP and how that is the the energy molecule that our body uses for basically everything. Our body has 3 ways to make that. I remember the first time I learned about it, I was like, what the heck am I learning?
Honestly, even the third time I learned about it, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. How does this keep coming up?
Yeah. I think I recognized like one word in the entire thing, and that was creatine.
Oh, I take that one. Like,
yeah. I was like, oh, so that's why I'm taking that. Good to know.
that's so funny. I mean, we were all there.
Yeah.
I feel like all of us that learned about it, like post taking creatine, yeah, you're like, oh, okay, there is method to the madness. Look at that.
It's not steroids?
Upsetting.
Darn it. Don't take steroids. They're illegal and probably not the best for you.
Yeah. Do they work? Yes. Are they worth the health risks that are guaranteed to come with them? Absolutely not.
Definitely not. So body uses ATP for energy. As we build molecules, it's called anabolic. I can't read today.
Anabolism.
Anabolism, thank
Got
you. And catabolism, just the buildup or breakdown of molecules into larger or smaller ones. And we mentioned there's 3 main pathways of using or of breaking things down and using them to build that ATP. You've got the phosphagen system, glycolysis, and the oxidative system. They all kind of work together, and we're going to discuss that a little more as we go.
So ATP stores, I'm sure if you've made it this far, you have an interest enough. You've probably heard of ATPs, the energy that our body, muscle, pretty much everything we do uses ATP, the main energy production or source. So the body stores about 80 to 100 grams, 3 ounces of ATP at a time, and it flies through it, right? Like if you're doing a 10-second sprint, you've burned through it within those first couple steps. That is quick there, so that's why we have the three different systems. That way we don't just get up and then drop down to the ground. Right? There are other things to keep us going. But ATP stores can be depleted by about 50 to 60% of pre-exercise levels in experimental induced muscle fatigue. like I said, it goes quick. ATP is easily used, like we said last week, right? Like it takes energy to the myosin to bind and release. So just one contraction is 2 ATP.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, you could say it's expensive to move.
Yeah.
As far as energy stores are concerned. And so by using the 3 energy system, we can maintain those levels of ATP to prevent that exhaustion, and especially if we're taking proper nutrients. Like you'll see marathon runners, they'll use like what's the name of that gel? It's like goo or glue, something like that.
Yeah.
It's like that weird liquid that has the world's weirdest texture if you've ever tried it. I did once because I was curious, but it's just straight carbs.
Okay, I have not ever tried. I have heard of it, never tried it.
They were selling it at the place that I worked, and I was like, "This seems interesting." It's a functional cell. It's straight for the carbs.
Got it.
It's not like a snack.
Yeah.
No. Well, maybe if you're into it, if you do it enough, maybe you like it. But I'm not a marathon runner, so it did not interest me.
And we're going to discuss why those marathon runners would probably want to use that a little bit later in this chapter.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is a reason it's a product, and there's a reason it's huge. People buy it. It does have its purpose. But so some reactions help to stimulate others with the byproducts, like this 2-ADP adenylate kinase. I think I probably butchered that. It's all right. Yeah. The exam doesn't ask you how to say things, just be able to recognize them. And then ATP and AMP. And AMP is a powerful stimulant of glycolysis, which is a huge energy production system.
So that first one that we talked about, the phosphagen system, this is where that creatine that I mentioned comes in. So those of you that are taking creatine, what it's doing is it's providing a molecule for phosphagen or phosphates to bind to. Probably should have talked a little bit about it earlier. My mistake. So adenosine triphosphate, that's a adenosine, ribosine, and 3 phosphates. Adenosine triphosphate. So that's the main energy system that we use. That third phosphate is a high energy bond. When we break it, it releases a lot of energy. And so we want to make that as much as we can. And so creatine carries an extra phosphate with it. And when we need more ATP, it's going to give up that extra phosphate to an adenosine diphosphate so that that can become adenosine triphosphate, again, ATP. And it does this through the use of a catalyst called creatine kinase. Unfortunately, though, this is a very fast reaction, but we can't store a lot of creatine phosphate in our bodies. Those that have been taking creatine for a long time, yeah, they'll store a little bit more, but they're not going to be able to just have an infinite amount in their body, and so they are going to use it up eventually, which is going to cause them to have to move on to other systems to as a primary source of energy.
Yeah, I was like, creatine is it's a good supplement if you're taking it. I would recommend you keep taking it. Like the 2 supplements I always recommend to people are creatine and protein.
Definitely.
Those 2 across the board are pretty well studied, pretty well proven. Other things, if you enjoy it, you think it helps you, sure, as long as it's not harming your body, right? Like PEDs. Please don't take those. But if you take your BCAAs and you like them, sure, go for it. But creatine's a good one that builds up, getting extra storage. Why not? A little bit of help, a little bit of extra power. Plus, it's also a water absorbent, so it makes you look a little fuller, a little thicker.
I like looking bigger.
So, kind of double it, or 2 reasons for that one. But, okay. And then glycolysis here is breakdown of carbohydrates in the form of glycogen, muscle stores, or glucose delivered via the blood. So glycolysis is just a breakdown of glycogen into glucose. Essentially, glycogen is just multiple strands of glucose all bonded together. Glycolysis is breaking them off into glucose, which is usable for our muscles. Glycogen is not. It's strictly for storage. Glucose is something that the muscles can break down a little further and use. So that's why there's kind of this multi-step process here. And so it takes 2 ATP to start the reaction and results in 4 ATP, pyruvate, and NADHs, right? So it's not quite our most effective, but it's pretty cost effective. Cost 2, we get 4 out of it, so that's a net positive of 2. Oh my goodness, keep sliding away here. And then in the low oxygen environment, that pyruvate is then converted to lactate, or which then goes to like lactic acid, which I'm sure most of us have heard. I was like, in the presence of oxygen, the pyruvate is transferred into the Krebs cycle, and the Krebs cycle is when you get your really big burst of energy. That's when you're really getting your best bang for your buck, essentially, on that one. And you're going to get a ton of glucose out of that one. I'm sure we got it coming up here in these next slides. Yeah. So I won't go into it too much there. But, yep, glycolysis is good. Quick energy. I mean, when you're looking at stuff, like I said, with the phosphocreatine system, you'll burn through that in your first couple steps in a sprint. The rest of that, like 100 meter to 400 meter sprint, like, this takes you quite a bit. I want to say it was like, what, up to
about a minute, minute and a half,
yeah.
2 minutes max, I think was the.
Yeah, if you really train it, like elite athletes are going to get up to 2 minutes of that. So yeah, like this, if you're short distance runner, you're sprinters, this is going to be like your energy system that you're really gearing towards. So.
And it does have those 2 pathways that you mentioned, the aerobic and the anaerobic. Yes. And that pyruvate here that we have is going to be the main thing that how it gets used up is going to determine if it's anaerobic or aerobic.
Yes.
And I forgot to mention it previously, but that phosphocreatine is also an anaerobic pathway. It's not reliant on oxygen. As you saw in that formula before, it did not have oxygen anywhere in it.
Yep, and that one can actually take place out of the mitochondria. That can just take place in the cytoplasm.
Yes.
Quick, easy access. But again, you burn through it fast, right? With everything, pros and cons.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, there's the anaerobic glycolysis, or often termed fast glycolysis. And it's going to be that when that pyruvate is broken down in the presence of a lack of oxygen, or where you're not necessarily having to breathe to use it, maybe something like a 200-meter sprint, a 400, any of those things that are going to take not a ton of time. You're probably going to breathe a little bit, but that's not going to be the limiting factor. In fact, the limiting factor is probably going to be acid buildup and filling those muscles burning. And as I was reading in the chapter, something that they wanted to point out is that oftentimes we call lactate lactic acid, and typically the lactic acid or lactate is not what's causing that burn that we feel. It's actually the hydrogen pluses that build up from breaking off of some things like NADH that we're going to discuss a little bit later. That H breaking off, as all those H's start to build up as they combine with that lactate, or the NADHs combined with the lactate, we get all those hydrogen pluses, which create an acidic environment within our blood. But lactate in of itself can actually be used to create more energy. Your heart uses it quite a bit, which is very beneficial as your heart is constantly pumping. So just another thing that it can use for energy is great. Also, lactate can travel via your bloodstream all the way back to your liver, going through a cycle called the Cori cycle, where it is converted back into glucose, so that it can then start that cycle of glycolysis back over again.
I always forget about that Corey cycle, but the body's impressive.
Yeah, it is very impressive and very good at adapting and doing things so that it can survive, essentially.
Yeah, like we've taken some pretty deep dives into anatomy and physiology, but I'm sure like for those of you that maybe haven't, like the more you learn about it, the more you're like, it's really effective. Well, when it's in its range, that it works. Right?
Yeah.
You step outside of that range, everything goes complete garbage.
Yeah,
but in that
definitely.
range that your body operates, it's insanely impressive.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then next we have our slow glycolysis or our aerobic glycolysis. All right, and so in this case, of sufficient oxygen, and so this is like you said, not really those sprints where like you're breathing right in those sprints, but to not pass out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just trying to stay awake to finish the race there.
Your brain needs oxygen.
Exactly. Right. So this, like, you're aerobic, you're breathing because you're not pushing yourself that hard. I mean, like a lot of times, for us as students, they tell us like the talk test when you get a patient on a treadmill. Like if you're able to have a conversation with your patient, or your patient's able to have a conversation with you, it's a better way to put it, they have not quite crossed into that anaerobic threshold. Like they still have oxygen to spare, if you will. I was like, their body's getting enough oxygen that they're fine and they can then communicate and do other things. But so, anyways, sufficient oxygen in the mitochondria, pyruvate is transported into the mitochondria along with the NADH that you mentioned earlier. Again, body's really good at recycling and using things. So like they are 3 separate systems, but you can see them like, okay, we're going to take this, we're going to burn through that, we're going to use what's left, we're going to toss it into this next system, use that, and then if there's something left over, like I said, like this is where the pyruvate becomes a big deal. Do we go and become lactate, or do we go and switch into the Krebs cycle?
Yeah.
Which we got coming up here next, so more on that in a second. And then we get into our NADH, and then we get pyruvate converted into acetyl-CoA, entering the Krebs cycle and then producing even more ATP there. So like this is like your huge thing with like marathon runners or distance running, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so the Krebs cycle, like you mentioned, it takes place in the powerhouse of the cell. Here it is again, the mitochondria.
Thanks, 8th grade biology.
So that mitochondria is where the Krebs cycle is going to take place. And the Krebs cycle can use a lot of different things to get going and keep going. We mentioned that the pyruvate can go into it in the form of acetyl-CoA to get that cycle going and continue on. Amino acids can be used in that Krebs cycle. Specifically, the amino acids that get used are branch chain amino acids are the ones that are typically used. And then also fatty acids. That branch chain amino acids, I was thinking that could be a good reason if you wanted to and you wanted to look into it further. That could be a good reason why you might want to supplement branch chain amino acids. If you know that you're going to be doing long, strenuous workouts, it might help to decrease muscle breakdown. I haven't looked into the studies into that, but if you want to, and that could be something that you may want to look into.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't clarify that earlier. Those are the BCAAs that I mentioned.
Yes.
Branch chain amino acids.
Yes.
That's on me.
No, you're good. You're good, man. We use a lot of acronyms. I have a love-hate relationship with them.
Yeah.
We may use some. Usually the ones that we use are pretty common.
Yeah.
Just a quick search of BCAAs is going to bring up branch chain amino acids.
Yeah. I think it's rare when we throw something out that's like unique to us or like our learning in our program. That's not often.
Yeah. But like we were talking about, that pyruvate, so it's going to get the Krebs cycle going once any of those are converted into acetyl-CoA. Once that Krebs cycle is going, it's going to produce a lot of FADH2s and NADHs. These are called electron carriers, electron carriers.
Yep, for electron transport.
Yep. And so the NADHs are going to help to create 3 ATP. The FADHs are going to help to create 2 ATP. I think I said ADP on the NADHs. I meant ATP.
Oh, yes, yes.
But in just a single glucose, once it has gone through glycolysis and through the Krebs cycle, different studies will vary, anywhere from 28 to like 38. Some may find that it creates a little bit more. But the general consensus is anywhere between 38 to 32 ATP from one glucose molecule, which is a lot.
It's a lot of energy. And it crosses what? 2?
Yeah.
Start that? So,
yeah.
Effective.
So that's a huge net gain of energy.
Yeah.
So we've got our energy systems. Just a quick little recap of those. They're working together. Some types of activities are more dominant for one energy system than others. Some energy systems are more dominant in other ones.
Yeah. And just real quick, little soapbox for me, because we had talked about this off camera before we started this, and I've had other people mention it to me. Tables. Tables are good to know.
Yes.
They are easy to ask questions on, and usually they contain the important information, like here, right? Like, you may not need to know the exact, like, okay, 2 to 3 minutes, moderate, fast glycolysis and oxidative systems, but just kind of know what you would be dealing with here. So if you're like, okay, I got someone who's running a half mile, right? Like, they're probably going to want to be sitting in that 2 to 3 minute mark. So you're going to want to know, okay, that's the energy system that they're going to be in. So kind of like, as you're going, like, challenge yourself a little bit, follow along, be like, okay, like, who would use that? Why would they need it? Like, what would be important to train?
Definitely. Especially if you're taking the CSCS, you're probably interested in strength and conditioning, either to coach or to use for rehabilitation, but especially for that coaching aspect. This could be something that you'd want to discuss with your athletes on things that they may want to look out for, they may want to be doing. Obviously, any type of prescription for food and nutrition is going to have to go through a dietitian, obviously.
Yes.
You, as a strength and conditioning coach or a PT, are not certified to do that, and we're going to get a little bit more into that in, I think, chapter 5 and 6.
Okay, yeah.
So probably next week. So again, another table, and just who's going to benefit from what type of system. You got your marathon runner. They're not going to get much benefit from that phosphagen system. Maybe for in the Olympics, that final kick to try to beat some other person.
Yeah, that last 50 meters.
Yeah, they might get into it, but that's not going to be that. They're going to have gone through a lot of other stuff to get to that point, and that's not going to probably be the limiting factor in winning. Whereas you have a discus thrower who spends all of about 5 seconds. I don't know a ton about discus throwing, but 5 seconds spinning around and launching the disc.
Right. It's a pretty max effort event within the very most 10 seconds.
Yeah. They probably didn't even really start the Krebs cycle during that time.
No, it would be essentially a waste of valuable ATP. They're not going to see the benefits from it. They're not going to push that 3 to 5 minute mark where they can reap the benefits of sending out 2 ATP.
Yeah, definitely. Then you got your snatchers. Those people moving massive weight really fast.
Yo, crazy. You do that, props to you. That's insane.
Definitely.
And then here we have our oxygen consumption during exercise. So, I mean, right, I would argue it's probably pretty important as we breathe, or that we breathe as we exercise.
Definitely.
And then I don't like passing out under the bar when I'm squatting or benching, or honestly, any lift.
Yeah.
I definitely want to keep active.
Yeah.
So don't want to pass out. So as exercise begins, right, our body will start to require more oxygen as we require more from it. Like I said, our bodies are effective, but effective can also mean lazy. So that's where you get that slow kind of curve there. As we start doing more, your body's like, all right, fine. I'll start consuming more oxygen to be able to provide us more energy. And so oxidation is the slowest system that we mentioned. So if you require oxygen, you're doing something that takes a minute, but you also get the most ATP out of it because anaerobic systems must provide ATP as the Krebs cycle ramps up. So we do and that's why it's important to also remember, yes, we can train specifically one energy system, but you do want to go through everything because they all work in unison with each other. Like I said, they feed into each other. So it is good to know. You can't just specifically be like, oh, I'm going to train my Krebs cycle. Do your distance running. Don't stress about training your Krebs cycle. Just do your training. You'll train what you need to train, right? Like specificity. If you want to be a runner, run. If you want to be a biker, bike. Kind of, it's as simple or as hard as you make it, to be honest, with stuff like this. So, but anyways, Krebs cycle ramps up. This causes an oxygen deficit. And so that's kind of what this left side is saying here. So we get this oxygen that we need to essentially pay back. And so once exercise has ceased, oxygen deficit must be made up for. We got to pay now. Like we got that interest that's been occurring, unfortunately, like our loans.
I like to not think about those.
I don't either. That tends to ruin my days, to be honest. So this causes what we call EPOC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. And this is where you finish your race and you're not just like, oh, okay, I'm fine. Your hands on your knees, you're sitting there just trying to get that back. We're trying to pay the debt that we built up while the Krebs cycle was kicking in and other things were going.
And I think an important thing with that they highlighted in the chapter is you notice that on the EPOC, it's a pretty quick decline, but then it steadies out. And they've actually monitored people for 24 plus hours after exercise, and they've been able to see that their respiration rate, how fast they're breathing, stays at an elevated level long after hours after they've finished exercise, because they are still trying to replenish those ATP that were used up during that oxygen deficit.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that because I've heard people talk about EPOC and being like, oh, you're still trying to recover that ATP. Your body's still using energy to recover. And so some people say EPOC is great for burning extra calories and losing weight. If your goal is weight loss, I wouldn't put too much into EPOC. I would put more into I'm going to exercise consistently.
Yeah. I mean,
a little soapbox for me.
Yeah. Look at the graph, hopping on that soapbox. It does slow down. It does get really low. I mean, and we discussed how much ATP you're developing from just a single glucose molecule, which is 4 carbs.
Yeah.
Or sorry, not 4 carbs, 4 calories.
Yeah. 4 kilocalories.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's going to be, you burn an extra 50 calories off of your EPOC. It's not going to be the hit or miss difference in weight loss.
Yeah. So, I mean, just take that extra handful of popcorn. It's worth your sanity. Promise.
Yeah. So we've kind of already hit on this a little bit, just metabolic specificity of training. You're going to use you're going to train what you use. It's not going to that you need to specifically sit there and be like, I need to train my phosphagen system so that I can snatch this weight, so I can deadlift this weight. You're not going to be like, I need to train my Krebs cycle so that I can run this marathon. Obviously, those are the extremes of the two ends of this graph. But you are going to be training what you're going to be using to excel at your sport, at the activity that you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure, right? And it's like kind of what I mentioned earlier. Like, don't worry about like, especially if you're dealing with, like, it's a little easier to get more into that when you're dealing with like, oh, track and field. It's like I've mentioned that a couple of times because it's easy to be like, oh, we're specifically going a sprint for 100 meters. We're specifically going for a marathon. We're going for 2 hours at least.
Yeah.
If you're worried about more of like your ball sports, right? Like soccer, football, baseball, stuff like that, it is a mix. You're not solely aerobic, solely anaerobic. It's like we're pretty aerobic with bouts of being anaerobic.
Definitely.
So, like, it is good to know this stuff and have it in consideration, like in the nitty gritty. But for the most part, like you said, train your athletes. You're going to train what you use.
Yeah.
If you have them running through practice, I wouldn't be like, hey, first 30 minutes of practice, we're going straight anaerobic. The last hour, we're going aerobic.
Yeah.
Run through your training. Your athletes will get their energy systems trained as you're going through a proper training session.
And last week we talked about, and we kind of looked at our individual sports of what does a soccer player in this position use? What does a soccer player in this position? What does an MMA fighter use? And I was actually continuing to think about that because I didn't feel great about my answer last time. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about a couple different types of fighters out there. My favorite fighter, Conor McGregor. If you've watched him, he's got about a round in him. He's got about 5 minutes. Then he's pretty gassed. He has a lot of fast twitch muscles that are going to rely heavily on his creatine phosphate and that fast glycolysis system. Past that, he's pretty gassed. He's pretty burnt out. If it goes past 2 rounds, I think he's won maybe 4 or 5 fights in total past 2 rounds.
Wow.
Not great past that because he relies so heavily on that. And then you have other fighters like George St. Pierre who weaponized just pressure and being in your face. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest. Yeah, he knocked people out. Yeah, he beat people to things, but he was in your face repeatedly the entire time. He probably relied heavily on that Krebs cycle and had trained it to such a level that it was giving him the ATP that he needed to stay in that person's face that entire time.
Yeah. Right, yeah, like you said, it's different things. Like, I mean, you look at hockey players and they go through shift changes.
Yeah.
They switch out the whole team. It's like, hey, you're going in, you're going max effort as long as you can be in there. And then we'll pull you out and you can rest. Like, different sports require different things. Like I said, worry about what you need to do for your sport and less about, like, I need to train this specific energy pathway for this specific athlete.
Yeah.
Like I said, as simple or as hard as you make it with stuff like this.
Definitely. I think an important thing to kind of mention is this is very much reliant on nutrition, which we're going to talk about later in some chapters.
Yeah.
Your nutrition is what is going to what's going to provide you the things that you need to start and move through these different pathways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're not feeding yourself correctly, which again, we're not nutritionists, so we can't like talk about what you need, how much you need to be eating of everything and stuff like that. But I mean, in a general sense, you can put it together, right? Like if you wanted to build a house, great. You got the wood for it.
Yeah.
You got the nails. You got like, do you have the utilities, the hammers, the tools?
Yeah.
Like, set yourself up for success, kind of a deal. Interval training. Forgot about this. All right, interval. So I'm sure we've all heard of interval training, whether it's like HIIT or just straight, like people call it interval training. So a method that emphasizes work to rest ratios that bias certain metabolic pathways. And so theoretically, properly spaced intervals allow more work to be done with the same or less fatigue as continuous training, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to go hard for 30 seconds, we're going to rest for 30 seconds. We're going to go hard for 30 seconds, we're going to rest for 30 seconds. And so few studies provide results that can be used to generate definitive work to rest ratios. I was like, it definitely, wherever you look, there are mixed. Like some people are like 1-to-1. Like you should be working as much as you're resting. Or you should be resting as much as you're working. Others are like, you can rest twice as long as you're working.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it kind of depends on your athlete too. If you're used to, if like you have someone that's used to this kind of training, you can probably hit that 1-to-1 ratio with them and they'll benefit from it.
Yeah.
You take someone that's been sedentary and they're coming to you because they want to make a lifestyle change. I would not throw them into a 1-to-1 ratio.
They're going to hate you and they're probably not going to stick around very long.
Yeah. So this is like a use your judgment. Do a little bit of research on this one. Kind of find like, okay, this is what seems to work for some people. I mean, it is also something you'll pick up with time. Kind of getting to know who your clients are or your patients are. But HIIT, like I said, high intensity interval training is a common interval training method. Typically includes running, cycling, something that's HIIT, high intensity, it's high effort. So, and it usually strains aerobic, so usually cardiopulmonary, metabolic, neuromuscular adaptations, and it is considered one of the most effective forms of exercise for improving physical performance in athletes because it's like we talked about with specificity.
Yeah.
You have times where you're resting doing nothing, and then you have times where you're going 100% all out.
Yeah.
So if you're training for that, of course it's going to be effective when it translates to the field. Of course they're going to be ready for like, okay, I've been walking for 30 seconds. Oh, there's the ball. I am sprinting to get that.
Yeah.
Or it's like, okay, I'm sitting at the line waiting for the snap. Okay, snap's gone. I now need to chase this wide. I need to beat this wide receiver down the field.
Yeah.
So
your soccer players, your striker, when they're defending down at the goal, yeah, he's still doing stuff. He's still trying to set stuff up. He's not sprinting the same way he is when the winger is setting him up. The defender, at that point, not doing a ton. Yeah, he's helping to get stuff moving, but he's not full-on sprinting.
Yeah, he's sitting about half field, kind of watching the play, making sure he keeps the opponent striker, in a position where he wants him. So he's like, all right, I'll stand here at midfield. I'll just be aware of my surroundings. I'll wait for the ball to come to me.
Yeah. Great example of just that intervals.
Yeah.
Working hard at some points, not having to kill myself at other points.
Exactly.
So the text laid out 9 different variables that you can manipulate with HIIT training. You've got the intensity of the active portion. It was mostly talking about like if you're running or cycling or things like that. So how many watts you are just pounding through on that bike. How long you're going to be doing that for. How hard you're going when you're not just full on going, and how hard you're going when you're not going at that high intensity, and how long that is. How many times you're going to go through that cycle of yes, no, yes, no. And along with that, how many sets you're going to be doing of those cycles. And then just the rest time between sets. Maybe you get so long off the bike. And then just the recovery intensity between sets. Maybe you're doing something during that rest break. Maybe you got off and now you're a CrossFitter and you get to go do 10 snatches, 10 power cleans at a lighter weight or a heavier weight. And then just what type of exercise you're using. Are you on that bike? Are you running? Are you swimming? What are you doing?
Yeah, for sure. No, it all makes sense. And like, again, here, like with the table here, like the work to rest ratios, like kind of make sense for what you want to work, right? It's like your sprinters, they're going max effort for 10 seconds. So you want to give them that 12 to 20 ratio to let them recover, let them build back up that phosphagen system, because it burns through quick and it takes a second to get back, right? Whereas your marathon runners, you give them that 1-to-1 ratio. We're not so worried about being like, okay, I need you to recover that creatine or that phosphate, phosphocreatine. It's like, nope, you're still making that Krebs cycle. That's still active. So we just want to rest you for a second, get something back, and then we're going to go again.
Yeah.
That's where it's like, it's kind of important to know this stuff, but again, nitty gritty.
Yeah. And I think kind of on this, I'm the guy that loves to have conversations. Sometimes I like to play devil's advocate online. But I was was scrolling. It was shortly after we had taken Therex, and I was just scrolling through Instagram, and I found some big lifter guy, and he was just like, he had posted a video, kind of just why is it so hard to recover after a squat versus why is it so hard to recover after my set of curls. And so in a very long comment that was, he read it and he responded to me, and we had a whole conversation in his chat or in his comment section for everybody to read.
I love that. Put it out for the world. Education.
Yeah. About, hey, when you're doing this squat, what intensity are you at of your 1 repetition max? How hard are you going? Like, you're probably relying heavily on this phosphagen system during those sets of what you were doing. It's going to take a while for that to rebuild. It rebuilds through half-lives. It doesn't just come back all at once. It comes back halfway, and then half of that, and then half of that, and then half of that. And that's why you're going to see powerlifters take 5 minutes, because at 5 minutes, they're at about 98% of their original creatine phosphate for that next set. Whereas when you're doing those bicep curls that you were talking about, you're probably not working at that same 80 to 100% of your max. So you may have burned through some of your phosphagen system, but you also relied a lot on glycolysis and Krebs because you weren't working at such a high intensity and your muscles didn't need as much ATP. So you're always more than welcome to follow either one of us online. And I'm more than happy to have those conversations with you. Yeah. I work nights and I get bored sometimes. So I've got plenty of time to type out really long messages.
Right. I mean, like in practice, like, right, these little bit of another soapbox for me, like this, especially with this next chapter, I don't always agree with everything that's in the textbook. So, I mean, some of the stuff we say is going to be a note for the exam, but look into it more yourself if you're interested and find out. Like I'm, more than happy you reach out to me and you just want to chat about stuff, go for it. If I say something, you're like, no, like I think it's this, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to be like an ego, like, all right, you show me your studies, but I will ask. I'm like, hey, like, where did you see that? Why do you think that? Because I'm just curious. I want to know where you're coming from. So if I do come off like that, it's not me being defensive trying to say, oh, I'm right, I know everything. I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, where'd you find that? Like, I'm interested. I want to read it, kind of a deal.
Going off of this next chapter, I read that chapter and I was like, hey, I'm going to adjust some of my programming that I've built for myself to implement that. It was the hardest workout I have done in a long time.
Really?
And you've seen some of the old stuff that I did. I've put you through that. I don't do that stuff anymore because it kills me. This was one of those harder workouts that I was like, you know what? It's not going to be the thing that breaks me or makes it so that I'm obviously not going to become a professional anything at this point in my life. I'm 31 years old. I'm probably at or past my prime. I'm mostly just, I can do things to continue to stay healthy, continue to compete in the things that I enjoy doing. I'm not going to be my 22-year-old self that was spending hours and hours in the gym, single, didn't have multiple children, wasn't working nights, going to grad school.
Yeah, the dream setup.
Yeah. I'm past that point in my life. I exercise for exercise. I exercise to stay fit.
Yeah,
Do the things I enjoy doing.
exactly. Right. I mean, like, I feel like it's important for us, like, whether it's healthcare professionals or trainers, either one. I think it's important for us to at least like participate or try the stuff that we preach. I mean, because like I had a lady say to me one time when I was getting ready to take the GRE, and she was like, "Yeah," she's like, "Sometimes." She was like, "I don't know, like I just think certain things are important for like profession." She's like I wouldn't go to a dentist that had bad teeth, and I was like, you have a point.
Yeah.
If my dentist had bad teeth, I would not trust that man. And so it's like it is good to like at least try and have that active, healthy lifestyle. Be like, hey, like I know it works because I live it.
Yeah, definitely. That was a long soapbox. we got off topic. We will do that. I mean,
Yeah, we're really good at that actually.
yes, a lot of our side conversations will apply in aspects, and we'll come back to them later because they are part of what you're going to be doing either as a health professional or as a strength and conditioning specialist.
Yeah, we're not going to go off on something that we don't think would be beneficial for anybody that's looking to get into any line of work that's relevant for this information.
We'll save that for our game nights.
Oh no.
When we're just messing around playing Call of Duty.
Such good nights. Okay, so here we got our combination training. So cross training, the use of anaerobic or aerobic training in the athlete that primarily uses the other to gain benefits, including enhanced recovery, power, and endurance. So again, it's good to train both, right? We don't want anybody being just one-sided. I mean, especially like even with like power lifters, Olympic lifters, they need mobility. Like, yes, they need power and they need strength, but you also need to have the mobility to be able to take that squat bar down to depth.
Definitely.
Or like, especially with like the snatch, like you got to have the mobility to sit in that squat.
Yeah.
So, kind of one of those things that's like, yes, it is good to specifically train, but don't just dump other aspects. Like, keep your athletes well-rounded. I mean, that will also just help prevent injuries.
Yeah. But you're also not going to have your Olympic hopeful shot putter going and running a mile or two. He doesn't need that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, keep it reasonable, but yeah, just be aware. Like, okay, we're going to incorporate other things just to keep you generally healthy.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, don't take your shot putter on a 12-mile run.
No.
That will not do anything for him.
That won't do anything for him. And actually the text kind of talked about how for strength athletes that type of cross training might actually hinder them. They're going to waste energy. They might build up some of those smaller type 1 muscles, hypertrophy and those that would be more beneficial in those type 2 muscles, training that type of system. But it actually talked about the opposite in endurance athletes. And I had to think about that one for a while. And the best conclusion that I could come up with was if they have slightly more power, they're in those muscles, they're going to use less energy in those moments that they need them. And they're also going to be able to use that for the longer. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I could see that because I mean something that like I think we'll get to in one of the later chapters is like our link tension relationships. So like it is good to have mobility, but also keep in mind to what extent, right? Like sprinters, I would want a sprinter to have a good amount of mobility, but functional. Because honestly, like you do want hamstrings that are a little tight. Because that gives them an extra kick that they don't have to produce. Their muscle is just going to want to contract on its own. And maybe that's the difference maker in that 100th of a second that gets them first or second place.
Yeah.
Right. So like there is that level of like, okay, I don't want my sprinters having the mobility of a dancer. I don't want you being able to do the splits, but I want you being able to have a range that's functional and meaningful for you.
Yeah. definitely.
So, but yeah, so may result in reduced anaerobic performance capabilities in high strength power activities. This is another thing, can lead to overtraining. Like I said, or like we said, like don't take your power lifter through a 30-minute aerobic session or 30 minutes of aerobic workouts if you're doing an hour-long session. Sure, 10 minutes of aerobic training, get them on the treadmill, get them running, go for it. Spend the majority of their time what's going to be beneficial for them.
Yeah, definitely.
And then anaerobic training can improve low and high intensity exercise endurance. Yep, more strength, less work on smaller muscle groups. Like you said, they have that power. If they need it at the end for that last final effort, they have the muscle fibers that can handle it.
Yeah.
Would be like same as you, kind of what you said. Like that would be my thought process for it as well. And then combination training, good for aerobic athletes, may not be good for strength and power athletes. That's probably your biggest take-home message. If you want to dive into the nitty-gritty of why, go do some research, have some fun.
Kind of another slight off topic, but also somewhat along what you said with that anaerobic training and having those muscles when you need them. I was actually having a conversation with my father just yesterday because we were talking about the NBA finals were on Sunday. Tyrese, I cannot pronounce his Halliburton tore his Achilles.
That was wild.
We had to watch that so many times. And then my dad was discussing or brought up to me, he's like, yeah, that used to be an old man's injury. Like that was when you were on your way out of the sport. And now we're seeing all these young players. And I was like, yeah, but look at how the game has changed in the last 7 years. Stephen Curry has completely changed the way the game is played. It's a lot more explosive. Yeah, it was explosive before. It's even more explosive. It's a lot more running. It's a lot more changing directions. Your Achilles tendon takes a lot more work now than it did. And a lot of these players that are young now, they haven't trained in that aspect. That wasn't how the game was when they started developing. And so, yeah, I was like, I would predict that we're going to see this problem for probably about the next 10 years, but we're going to watch it gradually decline as trainers develop ways to train appropriately for that type of activity that now the game has evolved into, because it evolved quickly. I don't follow basketball that closely. When I was a kid and throughout the early 2010s, 100, 110, that was a normal score game. Now we're seeing games that are 140 regularly because it is so much faster. It's relying so much more on that type of a system. And so it's taxing the body in different ways. Muscles are breaking down differently than they used to, and we do have to adapt. And it's a great thing of, if you do take your CSS, you're going to have to take continuing education courses to stay up.
Yeah.
And it's going to be things like this of how are sports changing? How do we need to adapt what we're teaching for that?
Yeah, right. And like this is where like it's. I hope if you go into it, you know at least about like if you want to specialize in a sport or you're working with athletes, at least know about the sport, right? Because like you said, like with the calf tears, like I mean, this is kind of getting more into the nitty gritty. I've said that a lot today. Good Lord. Anyways, so like I mean, we saw with Tyrese Halliburton, like that tear happened when he was planting, like he was eccentrically loading that tendon. I mean, that's a lot of force going through that. And like something that I mentioned with the sprinters earlier, like it's good to have that little bit of tightness. You get that extra power. But at some point, you do have too much tightness where you have that tear.
Yeah.
So it is a risky game to play because you don't know how much they can take until it snaps.
Yeah.
So like all things that you want to consider when you're developing a plan, whether it's for rehab or for training. Like these are things you want to be aware of to be like, okay, like I don't want to injure my athlete, but I also want them to be effective on the court, on the field, on the track, wherever it is they're playing.
Yeah. And along with that, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, I already mentioned I don't follow basketball super closely. There had been conversations in Game 6 about him potentially sitting out because he had already been slightly injured on that calf muscle. And I think he played Game 6 and they won. And then he pushed it in game 7, and within the first quarter,
Yeah.
snap.
I want to say, like, again, I'd have to look it up as well. I didn't follow the NBA Finals closely until Game 7 was the only game that I watched. But I want to say I also heard someone talking like, oh yeah, like I want to say it was Game 4 or 5 that they were like, he has a small calf strain.
Yeah.
And then he, like, especially like these games are not that far apart.
No.
So now we gave him he had no time to recover, and then he's continually pushing it in a max effort NBA. Like, of course, he's going to go max effort. If I'm the athlete, I'm in that spot, I'm not going 75%. Absolutely not.
No.
If I'm going out there, I'm giving everything I have.
Yeah.
It's the finals. I've played all season for this. I'm winning this game.
And you're the underdog.
Yeah, right.
You have defied everybody's expectations.
Yeah, especially in that circumstance. So, all things to keep in mind. Off topic, but fun discussion, I feel like.
In conclusion of this chapter, just something that I wanted to throw in there. Just train what you use. Take time, pause this video if you want. I know it's obviously a longer video. Look at what these different individuals may use. Who's going to benefit from what type of system the most? Who's going to benefit from multiple of these systems? There's no right answer. Well, there are generally right answers, but some of these, there are some parts that it's, you know what, they're going to benefit from multiple parts.
Yeah, right. Like, if you have sound reasoning, it's a correct answer. If you can prove why you're doing something, it's not a wrong answer.
Yeah, definitely. Now for our favorite chapter, the very science-based, very nitty-gritty, to use your word.
Yeah. Need to start a jar.
Oh, man. This is hormones. This is a system in the body that I understand parts. Other parts I don't understand. Kind of just let my body do its thing during this part. I give it what it needs and hope that it knows how to do the rest. And you know what? I made it through puberty. It did its... it knows how to do a good deal of these things quite well.
That was good. Yeah, through puberty. Check. Survive this long. Oh my goodness, that was good.
Homeostasis and adaptations. Homeostasis, I remember in the first time I took a physiology course and heard that word. You know, honestly, I don't remember a lot from high school. I don't remember learning the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell in high school. I probably heard the word homeostasis somewhere in biology in high school. Didn't remember it until I got to college and started taking physiology and these courses. Homeostasis, the body wants to reside at a certain level. It doesn't, if it gets out of that level, it's going to do things to get back to that level, if it's low or high.
Yep.
Certain things that we do may help to move that level that it likes to stay at to a different area. And so with training, you can move some of your homeostatic endocrine or hormone levels to a slightly higher level. The things that you do to that, or do to benefit from that, some of them are quite intense, quite taxing on the body, definitely not the most comfortable. It's going to be some of those high-level athletes that really want to take advantage of those things to benefit from them. And you know what? Honestly, it's going to be those Olympic athletes that the difference between winning and losing is that little bit, and they're going to be the ones that are probably going to benefit, in my opinion, the most from these types of training adaptations.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. So general adaptation syndrome, right? Underlies periodized training, and so I was like, this is kind of a fun one. So developed by Hans.
A German guy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna butcher that because it's sorry. Google how to pronounce it if you're curious, I guess. I don't know on that one. So GAS, general adaptation syndrome, involves 3 phases: alarm resistance, exhaustion, modeling how the body responds to repeated stress. So and this is where we get like into like our muscle building things like progressive overload, right? If my bench max is 185 and I don't try and ever push that, I'm just like, nope, I do 185 once, I rack it. My bench is not going to go up, right? You got to progress like, I'm going to do a couple low, I'm going to lower the weight a little bit, do a couple sets there. I'm going to push myself, see what I can get out of it. That progressive overload, like week, like you go a week, you're like, okay, I'm going to add a little weight. Go another week, see if I can add a little more weight. Maybe you go 2 weeks, like, all right, I think I'm good to add weight this time. That's that progressive overload principle. So must be followed by recovery to trigger adaptation. So that's where we're like, we can do our rest periods and our energy systems, letting our body recover and adapt, and then even like occasionally taking a rest day.
On that topic of just, alarm, resistance, exhaustion, resting, how many times a day in the clinic right now are you asking a patient, how hard was that? Scale of 1 to 10. How painful was that? Scale of 1 to 10.
Oh, dude, all the time. Like, especially like when you're trying someone or like someone that's not very active, you give them like a weight, you're like, try 12 pounds on this one. And they're like, how was that weight? And like sometimes they surprise you. They go, honestly, I feel like I could do more. And they're like, okay, next set, let's bump it up. Let's go 15, 20. And other times you're like, oh, this should be fine. And they get 3 in, they go, I cannot do this. You're like, all right, my bad. We'll take that away a little bit.
Definitely. And so we're just trying to find that stage, because general adaptation is more than just this chapter of hormones. This I'll 100% get behind. I understand your body adapts to the stresses that you put upon it, and trying to explain that to a lot of patients, like, hey, you were talking to me that entire time. We're not stressing anything. How hard was that? Occasionally, more than occasionally, I'll have a patient be like, that was a 9. And I was like, let me explain. 9 would be, if I asked you to do it again, we'd have to wait 5 to 10 minutes. You'd probably be able to do it again. We're not going to be doing that very many times. 10, that's your 1 rep max. That is, we're doing it 1 time. You're not doing it again today. You're probably not doing it again this week. And then along with that also just pain rating. Can't tell you how many times I'm doing an exercise with a patient and I ask this question multiple times throughout a session. I'm pretty sure my patients hate me for this.
Oh, dude. Especially with the higher level patients.
How much did that hurt? That was a 9. At no point in what you were doing did anything in your facial expression, your talking level indicate that was a 9. Yeah, you grimaced a little bit. I'd give you a 4 or a 5. I mean, I'm obviously not saying this, so I'll explain, hey, 9, 10, that's going to be the most painful things you've ever felt. That's going to be your childbirth, your breaking of a femur. That's going to be these really intense things. You don't want to go through it multiple times. Yeah. If I were to tell, if that was legitimately a 9 or a 10, and I asked you to do it again this session, you would walk out the door.
Yeah, exactly. Right. This is like when it's good to know your patients. Like, do we have an elite level athlete who's going to lie to you?
Yeah.
Hey, like they want to like Halliburton. I'm sure if somebody had asked him like, how's that calf feeling? He'd be like, not bad, 2 or 3 max.
Yeah.
It might have been a 6 or a 7.
And 2 or 3, that's a great number.
Yeah.
That is, we stress the system where we may be doing little bits of damage, but because of the general adaptation syndrome, our body doesn't like stress. We mentioned it's lazy.
Yep.
It is going to adapt so that stress doesn't stress it in the future. Yeah, it's not going to be an overnight thing, but it's going to be those little bits of, we've pushed you to 2 or 3. We've pushed you to 2 or 3. Maybe we've pushed you to 4. Yes, it was painful. You're adapting. Look at, you came into me and you couldn't bend over, and because it sent a shooting pain down you. now I'm working with you and you've just squatted down on this machine 30 times without a problem.
Yeah.
You've adapted because of these little amounts of stress that we put you through strategically, scientifically, so that you got better.
Exactly. And like it comes down to like knowing your patients and like watching their body language. I mean, like with like I said, like with high level athletes, they say 2 or 3. I go, all right, like I'm okay with that, but I'm also watching. Are they leaning away from the injury? Is their face grimacing? Like you look for other signs versus like maybe patients who are deconditioned, right? Someone that's got like a surgery or some sort of replacement that wasn't super active before, and they tell you like, oh, that was a 9 or a 10, and I'm sitting there like, you didn't even breathe hard.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna try and believe you here, but if it was a 9 or 10, I don't think we would have done 15 of them.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
and you'll see those ones that are legitimately a 9 or a 10 that it's like, yeah, that looked like it was hard. I had a patient today. Honestly, I would have believed him after the first rep. He was just stretching. We were doing some lumbar extensions. He was laying prone on a table, just pushing up onto his arms, stretching out essentially his abs as his back extended. He went to that first go just to stretch, and he wanted to do this one himself. This was not on my list of exercises that I was planning for him that day. I love this patient. Today he went completely off of my plan. Dude, kept asking, hey, can we do this? I was like, sure, if you want to do that, we can do that. This was one of them. Started to go, and he grimaced, and I was like, hey, how you feeling? He's like, it hurts, but I want to like see if I can get through. And I was like, okay, just remember, your body really likes, specifically this individual, he's like, really likes when you move slowly through these motions. If you try to herky-jerky it, it catches and you feel pain. So just move slowly. And yeah, he moved through and he grimaced the whole time. You know, he did, I think, 4 reps, and the entire time he was grimacing, breathing hard. And I was like, hey, how are you feeling? He's like, I'm good, but I can keep going. I was like, we're near the end. We've done a lot of things. We've stressed your body. We've stressed your back. You're grimacing a lot. It looks like you're in pain. Yeah, I'm sure you could push through. But let's back it off. Let's go and let's get you on a heat pack. Let's do some things that are going to relax your system after we have strained it for the last hour or so.
Yeah. Yeah, like this is like a lot of this stuff too that we've been talking about kind of just comes with time and experience. Like you'll get a feel for like, yeah, that was probably too much for you, or like, we can do more. You got it. I believe in you, kind of deal. And like, you do also want to trust your patients or your athletes or whoever you're working with, because you do also want to have that good rapport with them. They're like, nope, that hurt. I do not want to do that one. And you're like, in your mind, you're like, you're probably fine and this is good for you. But also, is it worth that battle? Are you willing to die on that hill and potentially make them hate you for it?
And potentially not come back. And right now we're students. We're paying to be in the clinic. Someday, we're getting paid for those patients. And you have to be able to develop that clientele with them and that patient rapport of, hey, explaining, this is why we're doing this. This is the benefit. This is where I feel like you're at versus this is where you're telling me you're at. And figuring out the way to say that, the therapeutic alliance. Because at the end of the day, they are the ones paying us. And we have to figure out a way to help them the way that they need and the way that they want and that they're going to benefit from.
Yeah. Like the biggest thing with patients or clients, they're part of the plan. Like patients are part of plan of care. Clients are part of their exercise programming.
Yeah. When I'm documenting, one of the first boxes that I fill out right after the report of problem, history of problem, the next box that comes up for me is patient goals.
Yep.
And that is obviously the most important thing. What are their goals?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, they're in pain, but what are their goals? Why are they there?
Yeah, exactly, right? And everyone's got different things. Like, yeah, I got 3 knee injuries. One of them wants to get back to soccer. One of them wants to get back to basketball. Another one wants to get back to golf.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to have, like, sure, initially I might have them doing the same, like, generic exercises. But once you get back to closer to, like, returning to sport, I am not going to have my golf or my knee patient that wants to get back to golf and doing the same thing as my knee patient that wants to get back to playing soccer.
You're not going to have your golf patient, just ballistically jumping and running and.
Oddly enough, no.
Oh, man. I thought that was like one of the most important parts of golf.
I thought it was too, bro. I had to watch a lot of golf videos.
We spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah, we need to
just
move
because
on.
it's a fundamental problem, or not problem, but a fundamental principle of just training. And there will be things like this that we'll spend some time on because it is so detrimental, or not detrimental. So what's the words I'm looking for? Instrumental. Imperative to being successful at what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, will this stuff be on the test? No. But good to know once you get out into a gym or once you have your clientele, once you have your patients, just stuff to keep in mind. Want to skip through them? Go for it. It's not on the exam, so I don't blame you. But anyways, so hormonal responses patterns reflect this adaptation curve via anabolic hormones, elevation during resistance. This model was foundational in resistance training theory for manipulating training loads and timing. Like they'll tell you like certain times to work out are better for certain things. Like one of the ones that I've heard and read about a little bit is the the opposite to, oh my goodness, with diabetes. What's the
Glucagon.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, glucagon. Yeah, right. So glucagon is the opposite of insulin, right? Everyone knows like, oh, my blood sugar's low. Like, or it's more common, not everybody knows. It's more common to know that insulin, oh, my blood sugar's low, I'm gonna take some insulin. That's gonna increase my blood sugar.
Sugar's high.
Yes, you're right. Sorry.
You're good. You're good.
That's all right. Yeah, sorry. So blood sugar's high, I'm gonna take insulin to lower it. So glucagon is actually the opposite. It's the counter. It's the balance to insulin. So glucagon tends to be high after periods of fasting. And so sometimes it's interesting, you can gear your training, like if your goal is, say, weight loss, you can gear your training to have your workouts in the morning before you eat. So now we've fasted, we've been asleep, so we've been fasting for anywhere from 8 to 10 hours, depending on when you ate, and your glucagon's now high because you're like, I have no blood sugar, I haven't eaten anything. And so we got a lot of glucagon saying like, hey, release more blood sugar into the stream. So we're breaking down some of our glycogen.
Okay.
So it could be beneficial to work out in the mornings when your glucagon is already high and you're maybe going to get that little bit of extra fat loss.
Okay.
So
Makes
that's
sense.
Yeah. So that's kind of saying like, if you want to try it, you think that works for you, go for it. See what happens.
Burn it essentially before the body turns it into muscle glycogen and stores it as fat essentially.
Yeah, exactly it.
Makes sense. So effects of hormones. Hormones, they're either anabolic, catabolic, or they have permissive effects. Anabolic, building it up. Most common, anabolic is testosterone, often in the form of steroids. Building up extra muscle. Along with that, you have growth hormone. There's my puberty comment from earlier. You get a lot of growth hormone release when you're going through puberty as you're going through those growth spurts. You're getting bigger. You're building a body, essentially. Yep. Catabolic, you've got your cortisol. Hear a lot in the clinic. Yeah, I'm going to go get a cortisol shot for my inflammation. Just breaking down that inflammation. Got to talk to them about, hey, that's great. That's a Band-Aid. It's meant to help you during this time so that you have less pain. You need to be in here doing these things. You need to be doing your home exercise plan during these times because that's going to wear off. And if you haven't been doing those things, you're going to be right back to square one. We need to use that, take advantage of that time to get you better where you're going to be in the least amount of pain.
Yeah.
And then just hormonal balances they just determine what our training outcomes are going to be.
Yeah. So hormone responses to exercise. So load, volume, and rest all affect the magnitude of hormonal response, right? So short rest intervals and high volumes elevate the 22 kDa growth hormone concentrations, right? So that short rest, high volumes, that's that HIIT training they were talking about. Like, it's super effective. And it is backed by this hormonal response, which we've seen like other things like, okay, yeah, exercising using large muscle groups increase testosterone and IGF-1.
Insulin growth factor 1.
That's what it is. Insulin. I was like, I don't know why I always forget. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, so yeah, if we're doing these high intensity interval trainings on bigger muscle groups, like, okay, we're doing squats, we're resting, squats, we're resting, we're RDLs, we're resting. So these bigger lifts, yeah, we're going to, like, you can see the spike in testosterone and IGF-1, hence an anabolic hormone. We're going to build more muscle. So, and then acute hormonal spikes enhance hormone receptor complex, or HRC, formation in target tissues. And this is like an upregulation or downregulation, if you've heard those terms. It just makes the body more or less sensitive to certain hormones that are being released in the body.
Yeah. I think an important thing to remember with this is that if you have high levels for a long time, the body will adapt to that, usually downregulating those receptors because it realizes we don't need all of this, not sustainable growth essentially. And that's why you'll see a lot of people that are abusing performance enhancing drugs cycle things.
Yep.
So that they can take advantage of, hey, I'm going to get the benefits of this, but before I get the downregulation of these receptors, I'm going to cycle off of it. There are very smart ways to do it. There are benefits, there are contraindications and detriments to it.
Yeah. And if you really want to try it, you really want to do it, go talk to some healthcare professionals. Go get their opinions and approval, quote unquote, on it. Like, try and clear it with somebody before you try doing stuff like this. Like you said, like, I typically explain this like to patients with like tens. Like, I tell them, like, this is like wearing a shirt, like upregulation and downregulation. Like, when you're in the morning and you throw on a heavy coat or you throw on your shirt, you can feel it sitting on your shoulders. And like, even as I'm talking about it now, you're like, oh yeah, like I kind of can feel that fabric on my shoulder. By the time you're eating your breakfast or brushing your teeth or whatever you do after you throw a shirt on, you don't realize it anymore. Your body's like, okay, it's there, but it's not hurting me. It's not really doing anything, so I'm not going to pay any attention to it. And that's the same thing with the hormones. You take them so much, you're like, your brain goes, okay, I get it. It's there. I don't care that much anymore. Yeah. So it downregulates and it makes it less sensitive to that. So then you got to take more. And then that's when you get that dangerous, like, oh, I'm just taking more and more and more and more. So that, hence the cycling, they're taking advantage of that.
So I guess my fun fact for this, I have a favorite chemical. It is called caffeine. Oh. I don't do drugs. You know me well enough.
Yeah, I really thought you were going to say nicotine. I was waiting.
No. I'm not that classmate.
I'm so sorry if he watches this.
You know what? He'd say it. He'd say it. So if he wouldn't, I'm sorry. He can punch me later.
You know who you are? Kind of a deal.
You know who you are, and you know who I am, and you know the things I say. Caffeine. So one of the things, and it kind of goes to the last chapter, the way caffeine works is it acts as a antagonist to receptors. So if you have lots of continued use of caffeine, you'll find that you're starting to take more and more caffeine because your receptors are so used to all of this that they have regulated themselves. And in this case, they've upregulated themselves so that the thing that they are supposed to be connecting with, they're getting. And that thing is actually adenosine. So as you have broken down that ATP over and over and over again, and so it's just the adenosine left, it actually travels and it connects to these adenosine receptors in your brain. And as more of them connect, you feel sleepy, you feel tired. Caffeine is instead connecting to these receptors in what is kind of a lock and key mechanism that you can see here. So all receptors have very specific shapes, and adenosine and caffeine are similar enough that adenosine can come in and block that receptor so that caffeine can block it so adenosine can't, stopping you from feeling tired.
All right. Yeah, that stuff is always just.
That's my fun fact for the week, in case you wanted to know how caffeine works and why I'm addicted to it.
We all got our vices.
So, some other just important little snippets. You've got your endocrine glands. Those are going to be your pituitary glands. The posterior pituitary is what releases growth hormone, especially during puberty and during things like this. It's responsible for growth. You've got your adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. Thank you.
Gotcha.
That are responsible for releasing epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol. So that fight or flight, and also just breaking down tissues that have been used or stresses. You've got your thyroid. Honestly, I can never remember what your thyroid hormones do and your parathyroid hormones.
I think it's a lot with like weight management, control, stuff like that.
Okay. I think there's something to do with like heat tolerance as well in there, but
yeah,
I mean, they both do so many things, and you've got hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, and I can never remember what they are. And whenever they're on a test, I study them for 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
Take advantage of short-term memory, write it down as soon as I get in, and then forget about it thereafter.
That is gone after that.
Yep. Get your pancreas. We mentioned insulin and glucagon.
Yep.
Other fun fact from one of our professors. The pancreas originally was two different organs and two different glands that, as the body has developed and gone through evolution, it has morphed into one. But there's actually, if you really dissect it out, you can see the two different glands. One's got insulin and one's got glucagon.
The stuff that man knows, like his embryology, like fix, is crazy to me.
Thank goodness it is no longer on the NPTE, and thank goodness he doesn't go into it anymore, because I've heard that was the worst part of his thing.
Right? Felt bad for the upper classmen above us.
You know what? They all graduated. They're all taking the NPTE now, so
yeah, they're fine. They passed.
good for them. Ovaries in females, testes in males. Ovaries do a lot with estrogen. Testes do a lot with testosterone. Both males and females do have both. Males just have a substantial amount more of testosterone, and that is a lot of why men have higher muscle mass, slightly different body structure.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, it's a decent chunk of the reason why like men have an easier time losing weight as well. Because of that testosterone, they just have more of it readily available to us.
And actually, the book talks about estrogen is one of the key components in fat storage, which is why women store more fat because of that estrogen. But all of these glands secrete various hormones. We talked about some of them. There's more into the bloodstream. where they're going to interact with different things. And that hormone secretion, it's regulated by feedback loops. If you have too much of it, it's going to decrease what it's releasing. Another reason why maybe staying on steroids, especially testosterone, for a long period of time might not be beneficial, because that feedback loop may eventually shut down your own body's testosterone production. And then just the adrenal medullas release epinephrine via neural stimulation, while the adrenal cortex releases cortisol. So like that kidney and the adrenals on top of it, different parts release different things.
Yep. All fun stuff. Okay. So hormone communication. So according to that lock and key theory that you had mentioned earlier, right? Just specific hormones bind to specific sites. And that's where even when you got into that creatine shares that same shape as that adenosine. So it blocks that. So it doesn't give that receptors. And your mind knows, the cells know the difference between creatine, they block it. So they're not, okay, I'm not getting any
Creatine
adenosine.
or caffeine.
Sorry, caffeine.
Sorry.
Caffeine. Caffeine.
I was like, wait, I'm learning something now.
Yeah, wait, sorry. Caffeine blocks that adenosine. Yeah, and so then, your body's not getting that feedback loop of, hey, there's adenosine, I'm tired.
Yeah.
Okay, so then hormone receptors, or receptor complex, or HRC, triggers downstream changes like DNA transcriptions. Like the hormones are how the body talks, 100%. Hormones and then nerves as well. So electrical, and even nerves use chemicals, electrochemicals, signals. So receptors may have allosteric binding sites, allowing other molecules to modulate that hormone's effects.
So what that is, because obviously some of those are big words. What that is you've got this receptor C right here, hormone C. Then you've got this other little one, kind of like what we talked about with caffeine and adenosine. They may look similar, so they may combine and block it, or they may help it, depending on what it is. So that is what that means essentially.
Yeah, perfect. So some receptors exhibit cross-reactivity, partially interacting with other hormones. Right? So, yeah, you got it.
Yeah. No.
Okay, I thought I was going to zoom in on something. That's
no,
basically what it says.
Yeah.
It's what it says on that one.
So there's different ways that our hormones will communicate, and this is where we're starting to get into the real nitty gritty. Testosterone, it's lipid soluble, so every single one of your cells has a lipid. I think they're all lipid phosphobilipid, something like that.
Yeah, just that 2 layers of fat. There's 2 layers of fat, and then there's a space in between them.
Yeah. So testosterone, cortisol, they're lipid soluble, so they can pass right through that. They just go right through it. They're going to get all the way into the nucleus, and then depending on what cell they have gone into, if it's muscle cell, it's going to help with increasing muscle size. If it is different things, it's going to create different responses, and you can see all of those here, just right over here. Some hormones do lots of things, and it just depends on where they're at and what cells they're interacting with. Broken down here, you have my terrible drawing from just as I was studying the chapter. You've got testosterone as it combines with HRC, and then it turns into just this little molecule. It's going to go into the nucleus. It's going to interact with the DNA. As it's interacting with the DNA, it's going to split the DNA open into RNA. From there, it is going to combined with those different parts of the RNA and the different receptors on it to create the growth. It's DNA is the genetic programming of our body, and so it is telling that genetic programming, hey, do this. I mean, that's as best as I can dumb it down. If you want the if you want the nitty gritty, go read the chapter.
Yeah, this chapter is rough to get through. Okay, so yep, so just hormone communication continued here. So polypeptide hormones act through secondary messengers. So I mean, a lot of time, often it's a cascade of things. It's like this triggers this, which triggers something else, which then gets the desired goal.
Yeah.
Pretty common for the body to do that, especially with hormones, because they just travel in the bloodstream. Your body just like, okay, like your pituitary, just, okay, I'm just going to put this out into the bloodstream and hope and pray it gets to where it needs to go.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty good at doing that, though.
It is. And it's why we have those feedback loops, is because then it releases something else, which gets back to the pituitary gland and goes, okay, cool, that message was received. I'm going to stop sending this hormone out.
Yeah.
Done.
Definitely.
So, which again is what makes steroids and things like that dangerous. You mess with that loop.
Yeah.
So polypeptide hormones cannot cross the cell membrane, so they do need to travel through something, kind of like in this picture. The merge gets traveled through, and then something else gets released. And then they activate secondary messenger cascade that relays a signal to the nucleus. These messengers affect transcription, translation, or metabolic pathways. So just messing with DNA or how energy is being used. Polypeptide hormone action is tightly linked to membrane-bound receptors. So again, locking key, which is again why it can just release hormones into the bloodstream. If it doesn't fit the lock, it's not going to activate anything.
Yeah. Amine hormones, they're going to regulate just acute stresses response. They're going to be derived from amino acids, including epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine. So, I mean, these hormones are obviously often associated with fight or flight, adrenaline, essentially. So they're going to stimulate force production, increased heart rate, increased metabolism. Classic bear with a knife, because why does the knife have a bear? Or why does the bear have a knife? I couldn't have done that if I tried.
That was so good. Oh, we need to tell our professor that later.
Oh.
Anyways.
Okay, yeah. So these hormones, they're going to stimulate all these different things. They're going to, they bind to surface receptors that lock and key, and they also act via secondary messenger systems. So it's just going to cascade, as you mentioned, fight or flight. Knife with a bear, because that's going to be my new thing.
Knife with a bear. I don't even know where the original bear with a knife came from.
I think Bo mentioned it during that third lecture when we were talking about autonomics.
Yeah, you're right. I just want to know where he got why the bear on itself wasn't scary enough and why it needed to have a knife.
Why doesn't it have an eye patch? Makes it all the more scary.
Yes, actually, I would be very afraid of a bear with an eye patch.
And a knife.
And a knife. You're a little more high functioning than you should be if you have both of those objects.
Opposable thumbs?
Yeah.
How are we hope? Yeah, we're not going to get into
that. Yeah, that's a side tangent we don't need to go down. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so target tissue here. So target tissue is like what we mentioned earlier, or what I mentioned earlier with it just releases it into the bloodstream and hope it gets to where it's going. That hopeful destination is called the target tissue. Better word for it than hopeful destination. So muscle is a primary target tissue for hormonal adaptation, right? So our testosterone, our growth hormone, or HGH, human growth hormone. And so these target tissues, like muscle fibers, contain receptors for anabolic hormones. Examples, the ones I just named. These tissues respond to remodeling, inflammation, protein degradation, and synthesis. So you give something more testosterone, it's anabolic. It's going to build something up. It's like, okay, we need to get bigger. We need to get stronger, kind of a deal. Hormone signals activate pathways like the mTOR and support hypertrophy. neuroendocrine, took me a second, immunology highlights how immune and endocrine signals coordinate muscle repair. So a lot of it, like you said, like that lactate gets produced and that's floating in the bloodstream. The body's like, all right, that's there. Good to know. I need to do something with that now. Maybe so. Goes to the liver.
Yeah.
Liver's like, yeah, I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah. We mentioned this already, receptor availability and sensitivity. If you have too much of it on a regular basis, you may downregulate just those receptors. Classic example is those individuals who have had a lot of sugar throughout their life and the insulin receptors have, just kind of downregulated. They say, you know what, we're not going to recognize all this glucose in the bloodstream anymore. We're just going to ignore it. That is diabetes mellitus type 2. Yep. Resistance training can upregulate certain things, and that's kind of what this chapter is really getting at, is that doing different things, well resistance training, you're going to get certain benefits from it. And so that's the real concept of this chapter, and we'll go over some of those things. Some receptors are going to activate other receptors. Kind of that feedback loop works in that way. Yeah. So that's the main gist of this chapter. And so we're going to try to go a little bit faster because we do recognize we've kept you probably longer than you actually wanted to. Hopefully you're watching this on 2x speed.
That right? Or hopefully you watch like one chapter and then pause. I'll watch the rest of it. If you're watching everything all the way through on 1x speed, you're brave. Not even I would do that, and I'm part of this show, I guess. Yeah, so anyways, blood level concentration, only part of the picture. So blood level reflects hormone secretion, but not necessarily receptor interaction, right? So we can say how much is in the blood. Like you said, we can't tell how much of those receptors are on a cell. That's a little harder to figure out. You got to pull out individual cells and be like, all right, yeah, look at that. Nobody's doing that. It's way too expensive.
With a microscope.
Yeah, that's way too expensive and not efficient at all. Okay, and then an increase might indicate a greater chance for hormonal action, but not guarantee it, right? It's like with diabetes. Like, I'm just like, the body's like, okay, we're just gonna get more and more glucose in the bloodstream, and then that's when you get like peripheral neuropathy.
Yeah,
it damage like that. Too much sugar kills other cells, but the ones that do need it, they're like, we don't care that it's there. We don't have the receptors for it. So, anyways, variables like diurnal variation, blood flow, binding proteins, and degradation influence hormone measurements. So, local muscle signaling, IGF-1, may not correlate with circulating levels. So, it is something to keep in mind. It helps, but you don't have the whole picture, kind of a deal.
Just because it's there doesn't mean it's actually going to be doing anything.
Exactly.
Hopefully it does.
That's the prayer.
So endocrine gland adaptations with chronic training, changes occur in hormone synthesis, storage, clearance. Your body's going to get really good at using it if it is used to using it. It's going to get used to storing it if it needs to store it. It's going to get used to getting rid of it if you need to get rid of it. The number of hormone receptors on a muscle or in muscles can increase. So if I'm constantly lifting and my body realizes, hey, this is a constant thing, this isn't changing, it may increase those receptors so that the anabolic effects of the testosterone that's being released into my bloodstream, it works better. And then they may become, just because the receptor's there doesn't always mean that it is going to accept whatever's coming at it. But some adaptations are that it's going to start being more sensitive to those hormones. It's going to start accepting it more. So this makes the endocrine glands and the hormone system a trainable system, essentially. But it is a very difficult system to train. due to some of the things that we've already discussed and also some of the things we're going to discuss.
Yeah. So different hormones equal different structural rules. So hormones are classified as steroids, polypeptide, or amine based on structure. These categories determine solubility, receptor location, and signaling mechanisms. Again, lock and key. Specific hormones cause specific things. If it doesn't fit, the whole thing doesn't work. For example, thyroid hormones act like steroid hormones despite being derived from tyrosine. So they fit the key, or they fit the lock. So it's going to cause the same action, right? Like something that I've learned is, or like we said, the body's very lazy. Something that I've actually learned on this rotation that one of the PTs that I'm under says a lot is a little different. It's with nerves, but nerves that fire together wire together. So if two things are getting sent often and long enough, your body just kind of adapts and is lazy and goes, I'm just going to send one of these signals, and then you'll still interpret it as both.
Interesting.
So it happens with a lot of chronic pain patients.
That would make sense.
So kind of wild stuff, but same thing. Body's lazy. It likes what it's like. It likes to make things easy on itself. So if it fits the key, great. It's going to get let in. If it doesn't, then no. Doesn't matter where it came from. So each class affects the cell differently and plays unique roles in adaptation.
Fluctuation of hormone levels, another thing that we've kind of already talked about. Different hormones may have higher or lower levels depending on lots of different things. You mentioned glucagon, higher in the morning. Testosterone, also higher in the morning. Cortisol, also higher in the morning. Training may alter these rhythms or interact with them. The text does mention that a lot of these alterations don't seem to be chronic, and that if I work out, I'm going to increase testosterone release in my system. If I stop working out, it's not going to consistently stay high. It's going to start going down. And it's not, my baseline level isn't probably going to increase just because I've been working out. It's going to increase while I'm working out and immediately after, but it's not going to, if I started here and I've now been working out for 2 years, odds are I'm not going to be here. I'm still going to be here, but as I work out, I might move up, but then it's going to go back to said level.
That's interesting.
Understanding these fluctuations and key programming can be beneficial, especially say you want to be bigger and stronger. You may want to work out in the morning to take advantage of that testosterone release. So, okay, here's the fun one. This is probably if I had to guess, obviously I haven't taken the test, this is probably the slide that you most want to memorize, table from the slide, just general concepts. More muscle fibers, more hormone release. Muscles you work, ones that adapt.
Nope. The good old use it or lose it principle.
Yeah. Testosterone. Here's the hard part. And this is the part that I tried to implement that, made my life really miserable one morning. Large muscle groups. So, I was bench pressing and I had programmed my working set at 80%. And I was like, okay, read that chapter, 85, I'm going to get more testosterone release. Okay. Let's try it. Okay, so it's early in the morning to get that high testosterone. I'm working at a higher load level now to get that increased testosterone. And I'm trying to now moderate to high volume achieved over multiple sets with short intervals. Trying to work faster, trying to do higher volume. It was a 5x5 at 85% of my max at 6 a.m. in the morning. And I wasn't in the 30 to 60. I was at like the 2-minute range.
Yeah.
I think I made it through one set, and then the second set I failed on rep 3, and then the next set I failed on rep 2, and then the next set I think I got 1 again, and then I said, screw this, I'm going back to my program.
I say, yeah, that
I
was
put
fun to
time
try.
into making this program the way I made it before. Whatever I was thinking then was probably right.
Like, it worked before, it's gonna work again.
Yeah. Growth hormone. So that was for essentially testosterone and just increasing its levels in your bloodstream post-exercise. Growth hormone. You want to hit this one? This is our favorite one.
Growth hormone levels have been shown to increase acutely, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I got lost for a second. I messed this
You're
up.
right.
I was like, oh no. Okay, acutely, either of these or both in combination. So use workouts with higher lactate concentration associated with acid-base disruptions. You might be thinking, how do you work out with a higher lactate concentration? And the picture next to the table is a pressure cuff, known for BFR training, otherwise called blood flow restriction training.
So, what? Why does that create a lactate area based upon what we talked about earlier and now?
We've tested on this if you can't tell. So, what BFR does is instead of causing a mechanical stress, you are now switching and causing a chemical stress by increasing lactate by cutting off circulation strategically. Don't cut off 100% of your circulation to your leg. You're still allowing some. If you're doing a leg, you're looking at 60-80% of blood flow. If you're doing like your arms, you're looking at
40 to 60.
I think it's 40 to 50. I think there's that 10% gap.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if 40 to 50, and so right, so you're not allowing as much blood clearance. You're causing more of that lactate. You're getting more of that chemical and that hormone response to building. So I mean, like injury-wise, we typically use it for something like tendinopathy.
Yeah.
Where we don't want a lot of mechanical stress, but we do want stress to say like, hey, we need more growth happening here. So instead, we kind of like cheat per se and use this chemical stress to still get those same signals and some similar benefits.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, where we can't have that higher mechanical load, it may be beneficial. I've gone through rehab and I've used this. I injured some tendons and insertion areas in my hip. And so I had, it's called athletic pubalgia. And I could not squat over a plate without pain. Hayden is my lifting partner for the most part. He got to witness me whine and complain a lot about the pain that I was in anytime I would try to squat. And so I did go to physical therapy for it because, I tried to treat it myself from what we had learned. And I was like, you know what, I'm missing something. Let's go get some more expert opinion than my own.
It's good to know your limitations.
And he helped me out. And one of the things that he had, the PT that I was going to see, shout out to him, is he had me do a lot of this because I obviously still wanted to lift and I still wanted to make some gains, but I was very limited because I couldn't handle high loads. A plate was wrecking my life. I was doing body weight with these, and not even body weight. I was using TRX bands so I could assist myself if I needed. And one of the things that this was doing is it allowed me to stress the muscles in a different way and also release growth hormone because it was in this metabolic stress. So I was still able to lift, and it was actually beneficial for rehab because now some of these tissues that were not necessarily getting all the nutrients that they needed because they couldn't get stressed in a way that they needed to be, they were able to be stressed. They were able to get these hormone responses. And I was able to, still working through parts of it, but I'm squatting more than a plate now again, which is always great.
And I will say, I did these without an injury.
That was fun to watch.
Yeah, thanks. I also struggled with the TRX bands. If you are interested and you have access to it, I recommend at least trying it. This is brutal and humbling.
Yeah. rep range. You're going to do 30 reps, get a minute break. 15 reps, 30-second break. 15 reps, 30-second break. 15 reps, 30-second break. Have fun.
Awful.
It is not a great time.
Awful experience.
Not going to lie. Kudos to you for doing it when you didn't have to. You know what?
I needed to pass my clinical.
You're right. You had to do it. The PT that I was going to see was also the one that he was working under at that time, which is why he got to witness me do it and why he had to do it himself. Kudos to our other friend who saw me doing it just one day for my own training aspect and said, hey, I want to try that. And I said, no, you don't. And he said, yeah, I do. And I tried for an entire workout, whining and complaining because it's miserable.
It's rough.
And he still at the end was like, no, I want to try that. I said, okay.
Brave man. Brave man.
Yeah. He put up with it. He did good.
He's a champ.
Last one, to optimize responses to adrenal hormones, those norepinephrine, epinephrine, cortisol. You're going to, bigger muscles, going to increase that again. Be careful to vary training protocol and rest period. They do that cortisol. If you are not varying and you are just pounding those muscles over and over again, you are going to break down more muscle than you can actually rebuild. That was one of the problems that led to my injury. Is I did some stuff that wasn't necessarily the smartest, and I had taken a long break from lifting, and then I got back into lifting, and I had been lifting for 4 to 5 months. Had increased in strength and had done so strategically and carefully. And then somebody convinced me to do Squattober, which my body was not prepared for after a long break and getting back into it. And it hurt. And it was about a week after the end of Squattober that I just couldn't squat anymore. And it didn't make sense to me. I was like, I just squatted all this time. No problems. And then I couldn't squat.
I was happy I skipped a couple days after we found that out. Saved my life. Being lazy worked out for me this time.
Good for you.
Thanks.
Glad my pain was to your benefit.
We got to do BFR because of it.
We were going to learn BFR like 2 weeks later anyways.
Yeah, it's true. It's not wrong.
Thank you for joining us in what I can only assume was somewhat of a good time.
Thanks for
if
watching.
it wasn't, why are you still here?
Yeah, that was a long time to hate something.
I think we're pushing about 2 hours.
Yeah. You hate yourself more than we do if you sat through 2 hours of this willingly, hating every second of it.
You must really hate reading the textbook and think that we're going to give you all the answers. We're not. You probably should still be reading the textbook for the snippets. I try to pick out some of the important parts as we make these slides, and hopefully I'm getting the things that are actually important. Hopefully our conversations are also helping, and
yeah, at least entertaining on the tangents.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna lie. We're not gonna try to cut down the tangents. They're what make it entertaining for us and keep us going.
Yeah, we squirrel hard in this and in class. I can't change who I am.
No. But hey, it's a good time.
We're here.
Thanks again for coming to SPT with SPTs.
Catch you on the next one. Oh, man, bro. Oh, my back popped. I felt amazing.